Welcome villagers, to the village hidden in the stories. I am your guide, KAGE, the creator of all the what-ifs you see on this channel, with your suggestions of course. I hope you like the video we have today. Please comment video ideas, and subscribe if you're new. Here are the shoutouts, and I want to thank all of you for commenting, and please keep doing so. And if you can support me, please do so on my Patreon, where you can subscribe for $5 to get early updates, text what-if transcripts, thumbnails, other arts, and gaming videos. The link will be in the description, so if you can, please help out. So without further ado, let's get into this what-if. Part 1, Wrong Hero. The dim light of the setting sun cast a fading glow over the world, bathing it in tranquility, everywhere except one battlefield, untouched by its peace. A cavern, once grand and imposing, now lay in ruin. Jagged rock formations and shattered statues, once seated in silent opposition, were nothing but debris scattered across the ground. Pools of water dotted the cavern floor, remnants of a once mighty source now abruptly drained or destroyed. The sheer devastation seemed beyond the work of any single force, yet that was not far from the truth. "Damn you, Sasuke," a voice roared through the darkness. A blonde-haired boy, his spiky locks wild and untamed, sprinted forward, fury burning in his blue eyes. Across from him stood his rival, raven-haired, cold, and unwavering. Both were battle-worn, their tattered clothes and bruised bodies telling the tale of a clash far beyond an ordinary scuffle. These were no ordinary shinobi. The first, Naruto Uzumaki, the child of prophecy, the reincarnation of Asura, the son of the Yellow Flash, had surpassed every expectation placed upon him. Strong in his own right, his power was undeniable. The second, Sasuke Uchiha, the last of a fallen clan, the reincarnation of Indra, the brother of Itachi the god of Genjutsu, was nearly his equal, a prodigy once consumed by the allure of power. Now, they fought not just for dominance, but for their dreams, visions that could shape the world for better or worse. But today, their battle would mark the beginning of the end for the shinobi world. Even after all this time, the shinobi was ready. With instincts sharper than steel, Naruto surged forward at unrelenting speed. He knew what was at stake. Failure was not an option. Leaping high, he aimed an axe kick at Sasuke. The strike connected, but against a firm block. Sasuke countered immediately, driving a quick jab toward Naruto's gut. Naruto reacted without hesitation, catching his rival's fist. With a sharp tug, he pulled Sasuke in and slammed his forehead into him, then sent him flying with a powerful kick. Sasuke tumbled across the ruined cavern floor, fatigue gnawing at his body. Gritting his teeth, he barely had time to stop himself before a fist crashed into his temple. The force nearly knocked him off his feet, but Naruto wasn't done. Twisting mid-motion, the blonde drove a kick into Sasuke's ribs, then kneed him in the gut before launching him backward with a final, brutal strike. Skidding to a stop, Sasuke clutched his side, glaring at Naruto, who was catching his breath after the relentless assault. "You won't win, Naruto," Sasuke growled, his Sharingan blazing. Naruto lifted his head, determination burning in his eyes. "No way, I'm letting you beat me, Sasuke." This was it, the final stretch. Their battle had raged on for hours, but Naruto wouldn't stop. He would save Sasuke, no matter what. The two warriors locked eyes, but their hands moved just as fast. Chakra surged around them in a violent storm, electricity crackled around Sasuke, while spiraling winds coiled around Naruto. The air was filled with a deafening cacophony, the sharp chirping of Chidori, the fierce howling of Rasengan. "Sasuke," Naruto roared. "Naruto," Sasuke shouted back. They charged. In a flash, they met in the center, pulling their hands back before launching their jutsu forward. The Rasengan and Chidori collided, power clashing in a violent explosion. The sound shifted unpredictably. One moment, the crackling of lightning dominated, the next, the spiraling winds of the Rasengan roared in defiance. Teeth clenched, eyes locked, neither backed down. But then, something went wrong. The raw energy at the point of impact began to twist and fuse, forming a brilliant, blinding sphere. Before either could react, it expanded, swallowing Naruto whole and blasting Sasuke back. Agony shot through Naruto's arm as it began to disintegrate, his scream echoing through the cavern. He barely registered the glowing seal forming on his left arm before, in an instant, he vanished. While unconscious, a voice whispered into Naruto's mind. When the glow of the blood-stained moon shines upon the land, the aimless spirits of slain monsters return to flesh. The world is threatened once again. The soft, haunting words stirred something within him. A faint sense of unease crept into his subconscious as his mind clung to the voice. Naruto's body twitched slightly. The warmth of curiosity and confusion flickered within him, urging him to wake. As the darkness around him faded, his eyes began to crack open. Once the blonde's eyes were fully opened, he found himself in a cave, one that was filled with the roots of trees, and only a dim film of light dared to reach him. What was that? Naruto muttered aloud, his voice breaking the eerie silence around him. The words he had heard, they made no sense. Yet, a lingering unease settled in his chest, as if something terrible had happened. He gave his head a quick shake, trying to clear his thoughts. None of that mattered right now. From the looks of it, he was nowhere near the Valley of the End. And he didn't have any of his shinobi tools, or any clothes aside from his orange pants. He didn't even have his headband. What happened? Where was he? Why did his head feel like it had been smashed between two mountains? And how long had he been out? Questions flooded his mind, questions that needed answers if he was going to make sense of whatever the hell had happened after his clash with Sasuke. Scratching his cheek in thought, Naruto suddenly froze. His eyes widened as an unsettling realization hit him. "What the hell happened to my arm?" he shouted, stumbling back. His right arm was gone. In its place was something else entirely, an arm that wasn't his, glowing faintly, with elongated, almost animal-like nails. His mind raced, he vaguely remembered the burning sensation in his arm before everything went dark, but this? This wasn't normal. Something was definitely off. He needed answers, fast. But before he could spiral further into confusion, another voice echoed in his head. It wasn't familiar. But at least it wasn't the same soft voice that had whispered of something called the blood moon. "Child, you're finally awake," the voice said, strong, wise, and kind, yet laced with an undertone of sorrow, maybe even disappointment. Naruto turned, scanning the space for its source. "Who are you?" he asked, his eyes landing on nothing but stone, roots, and ancient walls. "I was told the one I would aid wouldn't speak much, but I suppose that was because Zelda's old friend, Link, is gone." Zelda, Link, who the hell was this voice talking about? And why wasn't it answering his questions? "Hey, I'm right here, and I have no idea what you're talking about." A low, apologetic chuckle echoed, "Forgive me, I had assumed there would be little need for explanation. As I've said, you were not meant to be here, but when you and your friend tore a hole in space and time, I had no choice. I needed someone to take Link's place in these trying times. So I pulled you into my world." Naruto clenched his teeth, a deep growl rumbling in his throat. This voice, it had taken him from his battle. His fight with Sasuke. "Wait, your world?" The weight of those words hit him like a punch to the gut. He wasn't just far from Konoha, he wasn't in his world at all. Naruto forced himself to breathe, pushing down the anger rising in his chest. Losing his cool wouldn't get him anywhere. "I don't know who you are," he said, his voice tight with restrained frustration, "but I can tell you're not a bad guy. Just send me back, I have things I need to do in my world." Saying my world felt strange, the realization of his situation settled deeper in his bones. "I'm sorry, but I cannot do that," the voice responded solemnly. "The only reason I was able to bring you here was due to the rift your battle created. There is no way to send you back." Naruto's fists clenched. "There's always a way," he shouted, his voice echoing through the chamber. But before he could say anything else, he exhaled sharply, gaze dropping to the ground. A heavy silence filled the chamber. Naruto's breath was steady. But his mind was anything but. His fight with Sasuke, his dream of bringing him home, was it all gone just like that? His fists trembled at his sides. No, he wasn't going to accept that. There had to be a way back, there had to be. "I don't care how difficult it is," Naruto finally spoke, lifting his head with a determined glare. "There's always a way, and if I have to fight through this whole world to find it, then I will." The voice hummed in quiet amusement, though there was no mockery in it, just an understanding that came with age. "That fiery will of yours, I see now why fate allowed you to take Link's place. But understand this, child, your presence here is not without purpose. The world you now stand in is on the verge of destruction, and without a hero to stand against the coming darkness, all will be lost." Naruto's expression tightened. "And what, you expect me to be this hero?" "Yes." The blunt answer made him scowl. He wasn't about to just abandon his own world, his own people, for some prophecy in a place he didn't even belong. Before he could argue, something shifted within the space, like a whisper in the air, a presence unseen yet unmistakable. "You wish to return home?" the voice asked, almost knowingly. "Then prove yourself. Find the strength to stand against the darkness, to restore balance to this world. If you do that, perhaps the answers you seek will come to you in time." Naruto's jaw clenched, frustration burning in his chest. It sounded like another prophecy, another grand destiny forced onto his shoulders. But, if this really was his only shot at finding a way back, then what choice did he have? With a slow breath, he flexed his strange, glowing arm, reminding himself of just how wrong everything already was. "Fine," he said, voice firm, though the weight of it all pressed down on him. "I'll play along for now. But don't think for a second I've given up on getting back home." "Wonderful, but first, let's get you out of your place of rest," the voice said, its tone calm yet firm. "There is something Link left behind, his sword, the Master Sword. Though broken, it can be restored. You must take the blade and find your way." Naruto nodded, though it felt like he was agreeing with himself more than anything. His gaze scanned the dimly lit chamber, searching until his eyes landed on something resting against the shrine's base. The sword was beyond broken, it looked like it had been corroded by time itself, as if fast-growing rust had overtaken it until the very tip snapped off. Yet, despite its ruined state, faint traces of blue light pulsed along the untainted edges, an eerie contrast against the surrounding darkness. Naruto carefully lifted the broken blade, feeling its weight, before securing it on his back with chakra. He wasn't sure why, but something about it gave him the sense that it still held power, even in its current state. Turning toward the exit, his sharp blue eyes locked onto the thick, dry roots barring his path. With a quick, untrained slash of his new arm, the brittle vines tore apart easily, clearing the way. Without hesitation, Naruto pressed forward. The next chamber was larger, but just as dark and ancient. Dust and dirt clung to the air, disturbed only by Naruto's footsteps. His attention was drawn to the center of the room, an elevated shrine, carved with intricate designs. Floating above it was an ethereal green glow, twisting and shifting into the form of a skeletal hand. Naruto furrowed his brows, stepping closer. He absent-mindedly adjusted the blade on his back before glancing down at his own strange, glowing arm, then back at the spectral hand before him. A pang of realization struck. The green glow washed over his face as he hesitantly reached out, an almost angelic hum resonating in his ears the closer he got. It was calming, entrancing. Even. For a moment, he lost himself in the warmth of the energy. Then, as his new arm made contact with the light, the skeletal image pulsed a brilliant blue. A sharp chime rang in Naruto's ears. Instinctively, he stepped back, his body tensing. But before he could question it, a deep rumble shook the chamber. The walls groaned as if something massive stirred within them. The vibrations weren't natural, they felt deliberate. Naruto clenched his fists, preparing for an attack. Then, with a heavy clank, a hidden mechanism triggered, and above the shrine, a stone door slowly slid open, revealing a new exit. Naruto exhaled, his shoulders relaxing just a bit. "Guess that means I'm going the right way," he muttered, stepping forward toward whatever awaited him beyond. Naruto sprinted through the newly revealed exit, his feet barely touching the ground as he pressed forward. What greeted him next was a winding, almost unnatural path, an obstacle course of sorts. He was forced to climb jagged rock formations, scale walls with precise footwork, and even channel his chakra to walk across thin streams of water that cut through the stone. Each challenge tested his endurance, pushing his body to move instinctively despite the strange environment. At some point along the way, he stumbled upon a weathered chest tucked against the edge of a broken platform. Curiosity got the better of him, and with a quick flick, he pried it open. Inside, folded neatly despite its age, was an orange jacket, one that barely resembled his old one. The design was different, more like a hoodie than his usual attire, with a slightly longer fit and reinforced sleeves. It wasn't exactly his style, but it was better than nothing. With a shrug, he slipped it on, the fabric fitting snugly against his skin. "Well, at least I don't look completely ridiculous," he muttered before pressing on. At last, he reached the final exit. A gentle but steady breeze met him as he took his last step out of the cavernous ruins and into the open air. The sudden brightness made him squint, his vision adjusting to the vast expanse before him. The warmth of the sun blanketed his skin, a stark contrast to the damp chill of the underground chamber. It felt rejuvenating, like a weight he hadn't realized was there had finally lifted. Naruto took a deep breath and stepped forward, his boots scraping against the stone ledge as he looked out over the landscape. And then, he froze. His breath hitched slightly as his mind processed what he was seeing. Islands. Floating. Suspended in the sky like pieces of a shattered world, each one draped in lush greenery and ancient ruins. Waterfalls cascaded from their edges, dissolving into mist before they could ever touch the unseen ground below. The sheer scale of it all made his stomach twist with unease. This wasn't just some strange valley or an undiscovered mountain range, this was somewhere else entirely. Naruto swallowed, his fists clenching at his sides. "Where the hell am I?" he whispered, the reality of his situation finally sinking in. This world was weird. Sure, he had reluctantly agreed to help the new voice in his head, but Sky Islands? That was pushing his sense of adventure a little too far. Still, maybe this wouldn't be so bad. If nothing else, he could find something exciting to do while searching for a way home. Naruto stepped closer to the ledge, peering over the edge. Below him, another sky island hovered just beneath his current position, a small lake shimmering in the center like a target. He sighed, rolling his shoulders, guess there's only one way down. He took a step back, inhaling deeply. His heartbeat quickened, not out of fear, but anticipation. If he was going to figure out how to survive in this world, he'd have to take some risks. With that thought, he bent his knees, steadied himself, and jumped. The moment his feet left solid ground, the wind roared past his ears, whipping through his hair as he plummeted. For a brief second, his mind went blank, stunned by the sheer rush of free-falling. But then, a grin spread across his face. The sensation was thrilling, his clothes flapped wildly, his fingers stretched into the open air, and his body cut through the sky like a falling star. A wild laugh tore from his throat as he embraced the exhilarating descent. The ground rushed toward him fast, but his aim was true. With a mighty splash, he plunged into the lake, the cool water engulfing him instantly. Naruto kicked upward, breaking through the surface with a gasp. He blinked away the water and pushed his soaked hair back, laughing a little to himself. Safe and sound, he muttered before glancing around the new island. Now, where to next? With a simple push, Naruto made his way out of the lake. Small stone steps lined the edge, making it easier to climb out of the water. Once he was on solid ground, he gave himself a vigorous shake, sending droplets flying in every direction. His clothes, however, remained damp and clung uncomfortably to his skin. He sighed, maybe jumping into the lake without a way to dry off wasn't my best idea, still pretty fun. Brushing a hand through his soaked hair, he turned his attention to his surroundings. Small trees and thick bushes dotted the island, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. It was a peaceful scene, but Naruto's mind was already focused on survival. His stomach gave a faint grumble, reminding him that he had no supplies, no food, and no ninja tools. He scanned the trees, eyes landing on a bright red apple hanging just within reach. Guess I'll have to work with what I can find, he muttered, plucking the fruit with ease. He took a bite, chewing thoughtfully. It wasn't ramen. But at least it was fresh and edible. Survival instincts kicking in, he decided to grab a few more, stuffing them into his pockets. He didn't trust anything else he had seen, especially the mushrooms, which were way too colorful to be safe. No way I'm testing my luck with those. Next, he needed shelter. Normally, he could build a makeshift tent, but with no tools or materials, he wasn't confident in crafting one out of thin air. Leaving the sky would be the better option. If he was lucky, he'd find some form of civilization and, hopefully, a real answer about why he was here. Finally, he needed weapons and supplies. His shinobi gear was gone, no kunai, no shuriken, nothing. The only thing he had was the broken, rusted sword on his back, which was practically useless in its current state. With that, Naruto set off, determined to gather what he needed before leaving this place altogether. A few steps later, he spotted something strange. At this point, encountering new things was becoming routine, but this was something else. Even Kakashi wouldn't have seen this one coming. Before him stood a floating, cylindrical machine, its parts hovering and shifting independently to form a humanoid figure. A helmet-like structure adorned its head, while glowing energy arms wielded a wooden sword. It seemed to be searching for something. Hopefully, not him. Naruto turned to leave, wanting to avoid trouble, but the machine locked onto him immediately. Its shadow stretched over his own, creeping closer without a sound. By the time he realized it, the machine had already raised its weapon to strike. Naruto reacted instantly. With a swift motion, he caught the incoming blow before countering with a devastating punch to its core. The machine shattered on impact, disintegrating into dust before his eyes. "I was gonna leave you alone," Naruto muttered, his eye twitching in mild annoyance. Since when did robots know how to launch sneak attacks? This world just kept getting weirder. As the dust settled, two objects remained where the machine had stood. One was a glowing orb of energy encased in metal, the other a jagged, blue and orange blade. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Why did it disintegrate like that, and why were these the only parts left? Before he could think too hard about it, the once silent voice returned. "That orb is a zonai charge, and the blade is a construct horn," the ethereal voice explained. Naruto glanced at the items again before pocketing them. They could be useful, at least, he hoped they would be. Shaking off the strange encounter, he moved on. The thought of nightfall creeping in made him all the more eager to keep going. Naruto continued through the strange sky island, his thoughts still occupied by the weird robot he had just taken down. This place was definitely not normal, not that he expected it to be, but this was on a whole other level. As he wandered, he noticed another construct standing near a stone platform. Unlike the one that attacked him, this one seemed passive, simply waiting. Its glowing blue eyes focused on him as he approached. "Ah, you are not the one I was expecting," the construct stated, tilting its head slightly. Naruto blinked. "Huh?" The construct straightened. "This device was entrusted to me by Lady Zelda. It was meant for the swordsman named Link upon his awakening. However, as he has not appeared, and you are the only traveler present, I shall entrust it to you instead." Those names again, when was he gonna learn about those two? It felt like he was being left out of a big part of a story. The construct raised one of its floating arms, revealing a sleek device. It was dark, with gold and blue accents, covered in strange, intricate markings. Naruto took it hesitantly, turning it over in his hands. Thanks, but who's Zelda and Link?" "Lady Zelda is the ruler of Hyrule. She left this device in my care for the hero of legend, Link, who was expected to awaken here. However, he has not appeared, and you seem to have taken his place." Naruto frowned as the realization fully sank in, he had replaced this Link guy. Even the voice from before hinted that something had gone wrong. If Zelda had left this device behind specifically for Link, then she might have known something about what was happening. Did that mean she had answers? If so, he needed to find her. If he was stuck in this world, he at least needed to know why. Naruto sighed, pocketing the device. Great, another mystery to add to the pile. The construct continued, unfazed. "That is the Pura pad, a tool designed by Lady Pura. It will assist in navigation, documentation, and survival. Use it well on your journey." Naruto sighed, rubbing the back of his head. "Yeah, guess I'll figure it out as I go." With that, he turned away, glancing down at the device again. Well, at least he had some idea what to do now. If he found Zelda, he would know exactly what taking Link's place meant, and maybe even had some ideas for him to get to his world. Naruto moved past the fallen construct, setting his sights on the sky island below. A massive structure stood there, a shrine-like building that widened as it ascended, its white stone walls stretching high into the sky. Something about it felt like an exit, a way to finally reach the ground. Not that he had many options. He had already learned the hard way that jumping off these floating islands wasn't an option. Some kind of magic always teleported him back before he could fall too far. He needed to find another way down. With that thought, Naruto leapt to the next sky island, landing smoothly before sprinting through the dense forest. His fists tore through unsuspecting constructs, his legs carried him effortlessly across the grassy plains, and his shinobi instincts kept him moving, dodging attacks without breaking stride. He weaved through trees, vaulted over startled wildlife, and gathered anything useful along the way. It didn't take long before he reached the entrance of the towering white structure. Naruto now stood before an arched gateway, its intricate designs weathered and partially overtaken by moss. A clear lake stretched beyond it, its still waters reflecting the shrine's towering stairs. His time in this forest had already bored him, none of the constructs had put up much of a fight. But exploring this strange place? That was interesting. With an eager grin, he stepped onto the lake's surface, ripples forming beneath his feet as he walked across the water. Upon reaching the stone steps, he wasted no time ascending, ready to see what the building had in store. And what he found did not disappoint. A construct stood at the top, but unlike the ones he had encountered before, this one was different. It was larger, massively so, and instead of 2 limbs, it had 4. Twin blades rested in its hands, and a sturdy helmet covered its floating head. Naruto sighed. The thing had been watching him the entire time. This wasn't like the others. It hadn't attacked immediately, nor was it mindlessly patrolling. This one was calculating. Naruto lowered himself into a stance, studying the construct's movements. He noted the cracks in its armor, the subtle shifts as it observed him. Then, as if reaching the same conclusion, both rushed forward at the same time. Unlike the other constructs, this one was fast. It adjusted to his movements, dodging as he ducked beneath a sword strike. Another blade came down, forcing him to sidestep before retaliating with a kick. The construct evaded effortlessly. Naruto flipped to the side, using the momentum to launch an open palm strike at its chest. Wind howled around his hand as he struck, but the attack barely made the construct flinch. His eyes widened. That should have done something. Before he could dwell on it, the construct swung again. He barely dodged, creating distance between them. Now standing apart, Naruto steadied himself, hands resting on his knees as he analyzed his opponent. No obvious weak spots. No hesitation in its attacks. If he had underestimated it, he might have been killed. Exhaling, he stretched out his right arm, his new arm, to the side. It didn't matter how strong this thing was. Nothing could withstand a Rasengan. Closing his eyes, he focused. Chakra stirred inside him, familiar and warm. He reached for it, molding it into the spiraling sphere he had created countless times before. But nothing happened. His right arm remained still, empty. No swirling chakra, no familiar hum of compressed energy. Why can't I make a Rasengan? Naruto muttered, eyes narrowing in confusion. Before he could dwell on the thought, the construct lunged. He dodged instinctively, kicking one of its swords into the air. The blade spun before falling, right into his waiting grasp. Without thinking, he slashed forward, cutting clean through the construct's core. The enemy froze. Then, in the blink of an eye, it crumbled to dust. Naruto exhaled, watching as its remains vanished, leaving behind a large zonai charge and his newly acquired weapon. He slung the blade over his back before looking at his right hand again. The construct was strong, but that wasn't the real issue. He couldn't use his jutsu, and that was a problem. Naruto's gaze remained fixed on his right hand. Its unnatural form a stark reminder of what had happened to his original limb. His arm had been taken, burned away in the clash between his and Sasuke's jutsu. Right before he had been thrown into this world. And now, things were starting to make sense. The chakra in his right arm was gone, not just exhausted, but completely absent. Because this arm wasn't his. It wasn't from his world. chakra couldn't flow through it. There were no chakra coils, no network to guide his energy. That explained why he could water walk, but molding a Rasengan with his right arm was out of the question. But what did that mean for his other techniques? Frowning, Naruto clenched his left hand, feeling the familiar warmth of chakra thrumming beneath his skin. His left arm was still his own, his coils still intact. Maybe he could still use jutsu with his left side. Without hesitation, he lifted his left hand and focused. He pulled on his chakra, shaping it into the spiraling form of a Rasengan. This time, the energy responded. A sphere of compressed chakra flickered into existence, swirling violently in his palm. The familiar hum filled the air, the sheer force making his sleeve ripple. However, this form was unstable and unrefined. He would have to relearn the basics of making a Rasengan. Naruto grinned. At least he knew he wasn't totally helpless, but that also meant his right arm was completely useless for ninjutsu. And he would probably need to use one-handed hand seals, or at least make his own versions of jutsu. Lowering his imperfect Rasengan, Naruto flexed his fingers. He needed to figure out what this new limb could do. If it wasn't compatible with chakra, then what was it meant for? Naruto sighed, shaking his head. Maybe he was just overthinking it. This arm was probably nothing more than a prosthetic, something to replace what he lost. It just couldn't use jutsu, that was all. Pushing the thought aside, he bent down and grabbed the large zonai charge left behind by the defeated construct. He gave it a quick once-over before tucking it away, then turned toward the massive doors leading into the shrine. As he approached, the intricate carvings along the doorframe pulsed with a familiar green light, the same glow he'd seen when he first woke up. The same eerie, skeletal hand symbol stared back at him from the center of the door. Confidently, he placed his palm against the symbol, expecting the door to react like before. Instead, the glow flickered, shifting from green to an angry red. A large X formed where his hand had touched, pulsing as if rejecting him outright. Naruto blinked. Huh? He pressed his hand against it again, harder this time. Same result. The blonde stepped back, crossing his arms with a frown. Why wasn't it working? Before he could try again, the voice from before echoed in his mind. You lack the power to proceed. Naruto tensed, eyes darting around. You again, he muttered. What do you mean, lack the power? This arm worked just fine last time. A deep chuckle filled the shrine. That arm you wield, it is mine. Naruto turned sharply, his body instinctively dropping into a defensive stance. From the shadows of the shrine, a figure began to materialize, a tall, imposing presence with an ancient, regal air. Naruto's eyes narrowed as he took in the figure before him. The most jarring thing wasn't just that the man was transparent, but that he had the distinct features of a goat. Still, that wasn't the weirdest thing he had seen. Naruto crossed his arms. And who the hell are you? The figure gave a small, apologetic nod. I did not mean to startle you. Naruto let out a breath. Well, I wasn't expecting to meet the voice in my head this soon. The last one I had, let's just say things got messy. The figure chuckled, not loudly, but with genuine amusement. No, I am no mere voice in your head. In fact, I am not in your head at all. I am Roru, the one to whom that arm originally belonged. Naruto blinked. Yeah, I heard you the first time. Roru chuckled again, nodding. I suppose you did. The ghostly figure lifted his right arm, gazing at it with quiet remembrance. The limb was even more transparent than the rest of his form, likely because Naruto now carried it in his place. Naruto glanced at his own right arm, comparing it to Roru's before letting it drop back to his side. Roru did the same, exhaling softly before offering a small, knowing smile. Please forgive me for appearing to you like this. As you can see, I no longer have a physical form. Naruto's expression remained blank. Yeah, I got that much. Still not exactly thrilled about being here, though. Roru's smile faded slightly, regret flashing across his face. That is understandable, and it is my fault for not speaking with you sooner about your role in saving Hyrule. His voice grew firmer with resolve. I promise I will make it up to you. I will guide you, and help you find a way home. Naruto frowned, studying the man carefully. Was he serious? It wasn't like he had much of a choice either way. If there was even a chance that Roru was telling the truth, he had to consider it. At the very least, he needed answers. Alright, Roru continued. That arm should have allowed you to open this door, but it seems it has lost some of its power since I passed it on to you. Naruto looked down at his right hand, flexing his fingers. So you're saying this thing isn't at full strength? Correct. You can restore its power by seeking out places filled with sacred light, other shrines across this island. Naruto glanced around, spotting a familiar stone platform nearby, glowing faintly with the same green energy. Then, further in the distance, 3 more shrines, each perched on different floating land masses. Great, more climbing. Filing that away for later, Naruto turned back to Roru. Alright, I get it. But before I go shrine hopping, I need you to explain a few things. Roru gestured for him to continue. I keep hearing about Link and Zelda, Naruto said, but I barely know anything about what I'm supposed to be doing. What was Link meant to do, why am I taking his place, and more importantly, how does that help me get home? Roru stroked his chin, studying Naruto with a thoughtful expression, carefully choosing his words. Zelda and Link were investigating the depths beneath Hyrule Castle. I do not know what they sought. But they uncovered the mummified corpse of Ganondorf, the very being I had sealed away. Naruto furrowed his brows. Who's Ganondorf, he thought. However, he stayed silent, letting Roru continue. The seal broke upon their arrival. Ganondorf reawakened, gravely injuring Link, while Zelda vanished. Roru's expression darkened. When Link appeared in the Sky Islands, the gloom within him spread too quickly. Despite his will, his body failed him within months. That is why I summoned you. You are here in his place, because he is gone. A heavy silence followed. Naruto clenched his fists but gave a small nod, urging Roru to continue. Link had many tasks ahead of him, his most crucial being to stop the darkness consuming Hyrule. Ganondorf has spread chaos across the land, and each kingdom suffers under its own curse. Only a true hero can hope to break them. Naruto exhaled sharply. Figures. Roru's tone softened. I won't demand you fix all of Hyrule's troubles, but you must be prepared to face Ganondorf. Naruto crossed his arms, his jaw tightening. Yeah, I had a feeling you'd say that. As for finding a way home, Roru continued, there are only 3 individuals who might possess such knowledge. Naruto perked up slightly. Finally, something useful. Ganondorf, Roru stated first, then quickly added, though I doubt he would share that information willingly. Naruto scoffed. Yeah, not exactly looking forward to a heart-to-heart with him. Zelda, Roru said next. But as you know, she remains missing. Naruto frowned, that complicated things, and finally, Pura. A brilliant mind and perhaps your best option. Naruto sighed, so my only lead is this Pura person. That wasn't exactly promising, but it was something. No, he had to believe he would find a way home. And if Zelda was the key, then that just meant he needed to find her first. Besides, he wasn't about to leave Hyrule in ruins. He wasn't that kind of person. Naruto clenched his fist. He would fix this mess, not just because he needed a way home, but because he was Naruto Uzumaki. A determined grin spread across his face. All right, Roru, even if you hadn't said anything, I probably would have found these problems on my own and fixed them just to get home. But now, there's no way I'm leaving this place before finishing what Link started. Roru smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. Thank you, Naruto, I hope you find your way home. With those final words, Roru's form faded, leaving Naruto alone once more. Naruto sighed, his grin fading as he turned toward the nearest shrine. He needed to move quickly. Without shelter or a place to sleep, even if he gathered all the food he could find, he would freeze without Kurama's warmth. His expression darkened as he thought about his old friend. He had regained half of Kurama's chakra during his fight with Sasuke, but he had used it all up. Now, his seal was empty, and Kurama was still trapped in that planetary devastation back in his world. Shaking his head, Naruto pushed those thoughts aside. Dwelling on it wouldn't help, he had to focus on the problems in front of him. Maybe shadow clones were the answer. If he sent them to the shrines, he could gather all the sacred light at once while preparing to leave this place. The only issue was, he had never made shadow clones with just one hand. He had always used both. Still, maybe it wasn't too late to figure it out. Closing his eyes, Naruto focused on his chakra, raising his left hand as if forming the familiar cross seal. He molded his energy carefully, imagining his right hand was still there. Unnoticed by him, a faint chakra projection of a hand formed in the air, completing the seal. With a familiar puff of smoke, 4 clones appeared before him. Naruto's eyes snapped open, and he smirked. Confidence surging. Am I awesome or what? His clones exchanged glances before replying in unison, or what? Naruto deadpanned. All right, he said, crossing his arms. Each of you head to a shrine and gather anything of interest inside or around them. I'll focus on collecting supplies. The clones gave a quick salute before vanishing in different directions. Naruto exhaled, glancing around before setting off to gather more materials. Time skip. Naruto now sat at the edge of another section of the Sky Island, smirking as he eyed a strange structure towering in the distance. It was a massive stack of giant boxes, the topmost section spinning as it emitted a blanket of red light. For the past few minutes, he had been watching it closely, fascinated by yet another thing he had never seen before. Another Zonai construct, maybe? He wondered, or is this some kind of boss? Whatever it was, he figured he would have to take it down before moving on. Without hesitation, Naruto jumped down, landing right beside the towering structure. The moment the red light passed over him, the stacked boxes began shifting. The entire tower unraveled, rearranging itself into a massive, humanoid-shaped construct. It had no visible face, yet somehow, he could feel its attention locked onto him. Before he could react, the machine was suddenly above him, its massive arms, if they could even be called that, hurtling down toward him like a hammer. Whoa! Naruto barely managed to leap out of the way as the attack smashed into the ground, sending debris flying. He had no time to breathe. The construct began stomping toward him, each step sending out powerful shockwaves. The force nearly knocked him off his feet, but he twisted his body and barely managed to stay upright. What is this thing? He muttered. His question went unanswered as the machine struck again, this time with speed that rivaled a shinobi's. Naruto barely had time to register the attack before an enormous, block-like fist slammed into him. The force sent him flying, his body hurtling backward toward the island's edge. He dug his heels into the ground, skidding just in time to stop himself from falling off. As he caught his breath, the construct stood motionless, almost as if it was taunting him. Naruto scowled. Alright, so I can't use jutsu, and I don't have Kurama to back me up. How do I beat this thing? His mind raced with ideas, but none of them felt solid. He didn't know how tough this thing was, but he doubted an imperfect Rasengan would do much. Guess I'll just have to test what works. With that, Naruto sprinted forward, ducking and weaving past the construct's attacks as it gave chase. After several close calls, he started noticing something, a section of the construct that looked different. It was more intricately designed than the rest, and faint pulses of energy coursed through it, spreading into the other blocks that made up its body. Naruto smirked. Looks like I found your weak spot. But just as he locked onto the intricately designed core, the construct adapted. Its entire body shifted, the blocks rearranging in an instant. What had once been a humanoid form now deconstructed itself into a chaotic mass of floating pieces, all rotating around that glowing core like a bizarre puzzle in motion. Naruto clicked his tongue. So you can switch forms, huh? That's just cheating. The core, now harder to reach, pulsed once. Then, as if responding to his words, the construct's floating blocks snapped into place, forming a massive cube. Naruto barely had time to process before the cube launched itself at him. Shit, he dove out of the way just in time, the cube slamming into the ground with enough force to shake the entire island. The moment it landed, the construct immediately broke apart again, its blocks spiraling in different directions before realigning into its humanoid form. Naruto's mind raced. Okay, it can swap between different formations, but that core is definitely the key. If I can just land a solid hit on it. His thoughts were cut short as the construct lunged at him once more, swinging one of its massive arms. This time, instead of dodging, Naruto took a risk. He sprinted toward the attack. As the blocky fist came crashing down, Naruto used his momentum to leap onto the arm, his feet landing on the smooth, stone-like surface. For a second, he felt a flicker of triumph. Then the arm disassembled beneath him. Oh, come on. The blocks that made up the construct's arm scattered, leaving Naruto in free fall. He twisted in midair, barely catching himself by slamming his hand against one of the still floating blocks. Using his chakra, he clung to the surface before flipping onto another piece, climbing as fast as he could. The construct, however, wasn't having any of it. The moment Naruto tried to get closer to the core, the blocks violently shook, trying to throw him off. Naruto gritted his teeth. If that's how you want to play it. Instead of trying to stabilize himself, he used the momentum of the shaking to propel himself forward, launching off one of the blocks just as the construct reformed its body. His eyes locked onto the glowing core. Gotcha. He reeled his fist back, ready to punch straight into the weak spot, only for the construct to split apart again, the core vanishing behind another shifting mass of blocks. Naruto's attack hit nothing but air. He cursed as he tumbled downward, landing hard on the stone platform below. He barely had time to roll back onto his feet before the construct struck again, this time shifting into a wall of blocks and slamming down toward him like a giant hammer. Naruto darted to the side, panting slightly. This thing learns fast. He needed to rethink his approach. If the construct could keep changing its shape whenever he got close, then attacking head-on wouldn't work. He smirked. Guess it's time for some ninja tricks. Focusing on his chakra, he quickly formed a single-handed cross seal. The moment he did, 3 shadow clones puffed into existence. Alright, listen up, Naruto said quickly. That thing keeps switching its body whenever I try to get close, so here's the plan. The clones nodded before dashing in different directions, each one moving to attack from a different angle. The construct shifted, seemingly confused by the multiple threats. Then, as expected, it reformed its humanoid shape and lashed out, this time at the clones. That was its mistake. As the construct swung, Naruto used the distraction to leap up from behind, pushing off a stray floating block to launch himself toward the core. This time, he wouldn't miss. He twisted midair, focusing his chakra into his palm. And with a clenched fist, he sprung in, his attack connected, and he let out a battle cry. The moment his chakra made contact with the core, the entire construct shuddered. The blocks around it quaked violently as the force of the punch began drilling into the weak point, but instead of breaking apart, the construct did something new. The blocks around the core collapsed inward, forming an impromptu armor around the weak spot, cutting off the full force of the fist. The remaining blocks twisted together into an arm, slamming into Naruto mid-attack and sending him flying once again. Naruto tumbled across the ground before skidding to a stop. He groaned, pushing himself up. Man, this thing just won't go down easy, huh? The construct stood motionless for a moment, as if processing his latest attack. Then, in an almost deliberate movement, it raised both of its massive arms. Naruto's eyes widened as a red glow formed between them. Oh, that can't be good. A moment later, a beam of pure energy blasted toward him. Naruto's instincts screamed at him to move. He barely had time to react before the beam of red energy tore through the air, cutting straight through the stone platform where he had stood a second ago. The sheer force of it sent him flying backward, the heat scorching the edges of his jacket. "That's new," Naruto yelled, twisting midair and landing in a rough roll. He skidded to a stop, panting as he glanced back. A massive chunk of the battlefield was now gone, obliterated by the blast. The construct wasn't playing around anymore. Alright, so it can fire energy blasts now. As if it wasn't already enough of a problem. Naruto's mind raced. He needed a way to disable its ability to shift forms before he could get another clean hit on that core. His last attack had done something, he could tell from the way the construct had frozen for a moment, but it wasn't enough. Maybe if he hit it with an even stronger attack, another beam fired. Naruto's eyes snapped up just in time to see the red light coming straight for him. No time to dodge. Fine, time to test something. Instead of moving, Naruto braced himself, slamming his foot into the ground and crossing his arms. As the beam neared, he poured chakra into his palm, then caught the blast. The impact sent a shockwave through his entire body. His arms burned from the sheer force, his feet dragging against the stone. But he held on, chakra flaring wildly as he redirected the energy, twisting his body at the last second to throw the beam to the side. It carved a deep trench into the ground, missing him entirely. Naruto exhaled sharply, shaking his arms out. Okay, good to know I can do that. The construct, however, wasn't about to give him time to celebrate. Its blocks shifted again, this time taking the form of a massive floating fortress, with the core tucked deep inside its structure. Hiding again, Naruto smirked, rolling his shoulders. "You're making me work for this, huh?" He formed another one-handed seal. This time, 6 clones appeared. "Alright, you guys know what to do," he said. The clones grinned. "Distract, disrupt, and destroy?" "Exactly." In a blur of motion, the clones scattered, attacking from all sides. One went high, leaping onto the shifting blocks. Another ran along the edges, throwing debris to test the construct's reactions. The rest feinted attacks, forcing it to divide its focus. Naruto, meanwhile, circled around, watching carefully. The construct had to shift at some point. the moment the construct reconfigured to swat away 2 clones, it left the core slightly exposed. Naruto didn't waste a second. He sprinted forward, chakra surging through his legs as he leaped onto one of the floating blocks. The second his feet touched the surface, he pushed off, using the momentum to vault higher. Another clone popped into existence mid-air, grabbing Naruto's arm and throwing him even further. The core loomed ahead, Naruto twisted, channeling all of his chakra into his palm. "Take this, Rasengan." The familiar sphere of imperfect spiraling energy smashed into the core with full force. This time, there was no blocking it. The moment his attack connected, the construct froze. The intricate patterns on its core flickered violently, the energy pulsing out of sync. Then, with a massive shockwave, the entire structure detonated. Naruto barely had time to throw up his arms before the explosion sent him tumbling backward. When he finally regained his footing, he looked up, just in time to see the remaining blocks disintegrate into golden particles, fading into the sky. The battlefield was silent. Then, yes, Naruto pumped his fist. "Who's awesome? I'm awesome." A lone clone, still standing, rolled his eyes. "Yeah, just go collect the loot already." Naruto grinned, "Right." He turned, eyeing the glowing remains of the construct's core. It had left behind something, probably another Zonai charge. As he walked toward it, he smirked to himself. This world might be strange, but at least the fights were fun. Before Naruto could bask in his victory any longer, for more clones appeared in puffs of smoke, the original 4 he had sent to the shrines about an hour ago. If they were back, that meant it was time to move on. But first, he needed to see exactly what they had found. From them, Naruto gained a wealth of new abilities and tools. Chrono Grip allows him to use energy to grab, move, rotate, attach objects together, and manipulate their flow of time to reverse or fast forward themselves or their properties, opening up new possibilities for both combat and creation. Forge enhances, creates, and fuses weapons, shields, bows, and arrows using any materials he finds. Phantom Step lets him phase through solid surfaces, bypass obstacles, and reposition instantly in combat. In addition to these abilities, his clones had gathered several useful items: an infinite storage bag, similar to a shinobi storage seal but capable of holding an unlimited amount without adding weight. Several Zonai devices, ancient constructs with a variety of functions. A Zonai cell belt, designed to store and supply extra energy to Zonai devices, ensuring they wouldn't run out of power at a critical moment. A handful of Zonai charges, which could be used to replenish energy reserves when needed. Naruto smirked as he took everything in. With these new abilities and gear, surviving in this strange world was going to be a whole lot easier. On top of that, with the abilities he had gained, his arm was now nearly at full power. That meant he should have more than enough strength to open the door in the Time Shrine, especially since his clones had already taken care of all 4 shrines for him. But before he left, he wanted to have some fun with his new arm. Naruto threw up a shield from his bag, letting it float in the air before using Phantom Step, phasing through the shield while it was still airborne, before jumping off to a higher sky island, and then grabbing the shield mid-air with Chrono Grip. Naruto grinned, that was fun. He began to wonder what the limits of his arm's new powers were and exactly how Phantom Step and his other abilities worked. With that thought, Naruto decided to test out the limits of each ability. Judging by the sun's position, he had at least 2 hours to goof around before leaving this place to find a village or town. The blonde ended up messing with the Zonai constructs. Mainly the hostile ones, by throwing them up in the air with Chrono Grip before reversing their movement and slamming them into the ground at high speed. Another thing he did was test the extremes of Phantom Step. He figured out that at certain angles, he could phase through walls. And while it wasn't in the name, he could also descend as well, provided he adjusted his positioning correctly. Chrono Grip was one of the most battle-based abilities he had ever seen. He threw weapons, then used Chrono Grip to recall them back to his hand, causing damage to anything in their path. He could also choose specific aspects of what was recalled instead of recalling the whole object. Even more, he could fast-forward objects, giving them an intense speed boost. He was sure there were other ways to use Chrono Grip, but he had to figure them out. Next was Forge. Naruto didn't even need to explain how useful it was, and the limitations weren't as bad as most would think. Creating and enhancing weapons was a game changer, and as long as he had materials, he could make anything he needed. Another thing about Chrono Grip that he liked was how he could connect Zonai devices to allow them to work in tandem. While currently, he only had a few fans, flamethrowers, and a glider, he was sure combining these with other items or Zonai tech would make them even better. Which is why he spent some time attaching fans to the helmets of constructs. This trick sent most of them flying, as constructs were practically connected to their helmets, and it earned a quick laugh from the blonde. The best part about these abilities was that they could be upgraded. That made this arm all the more interesting. After his few hours were up, Naruto made his way towards the Shrine of Time. And without any hesitation, he placed his hand on the glowing green symbol. The energy of the shrine pulsed in response, the massive stone doors trembled before slowly beginning to part, revealing the chamber beyond. A rush of ancient energy filled the air, and Naruto felt his Zonai arm resonate with the shrine's power. Stepping inside, he found himself in a vast, dimly lit hall, its walls adorned with intricate Zonai engravings. The glow of the ancient markings flickered as if reacting to his presence. At the center of the room stood a raised platform, upon which rested a construct unlike any he had encountered before. Unlike the hostile sentries he had been messing with earlier, this one exuded a sense of authority. Its frame was sleeker, its armor plated with golden inlays, and its eye pulsed with a deeper, almost intelligent light. As Naruto approached, the construct shifted, straightening its posture before speaking in a deep, resonating tone. "Bearer of the Zonai's gift, you stand before the gate of the first ascendant. To proceed, you must prove your mastery of the power entrusted to you." Naruto tilted his head, so basically, a test. He cracked his knuckles, a smirk tugging at his lips. "Fine by me." The construct raised its arms, its plating shifting as weapons formed from within, one a glowing energy blade, the other a massive reinforced shield. Its eye locked onto Naruto, and in an instant, it lunged forward. Naruto reacted instantly, activating Phantom Step to phase backward, avoiding the initial strike. The construct's blade slashed through the space where he had just been, carving a faint glowing arc in the air. Not wasting a second, Naruto retaliated. He grabbed a broken chunk of stone with Chrono Grip, reversing its time flow and sending it flying back into the air before accelerating it forward at high speed toward the construct. The Guardian tilted its shield at an angle, deflecting the projectile effortlessly before closing the distance again. Naruto grinned, "Guess I'll have to get creative." He tossed a kunai, then immediately activated Chrono Grip, but instead of reversing it, he fast-forwarded it, tripling its speed. The sudden acceleration caught the construct off guard, and the kunai scraped against its plating, leaving a faint mark. The Guardian, undeterred, thrust its shield forward, and to Naruto's surprise, it expanded outward, splitting into multiple floating segments that surrounded him. Before he could react, they shot toward him like homing projectiles. Naruto activated Phantom Step, phasing through the first barrage before using Chrono Grip on the remaining segments, halting them mid-flight and sending them spiraling away. The construct adjusted, recalibrating its stance. Its energy blade pulsed, shifting into a longer, spear-like form as it lunged once more. Naruto met the attack head-on, using chrono grip to slow the spear's momentum before closing in. With a flick of his hand, he summoned a Rasengan, but instead of striking outright, he fast-forwarded its energy, causing the swirling chakra to accelerate violently. The air cracked as he slammed the overclocked Rasengan into the construct's shield. The impact sent a shockwave through the chamber, causing the engravings on the walls to glow even brighter. The fight was only getting started. The force of the impact sent Naruto skidding backward, his feet barely finding purchase on the stone floor. The construct, despite the overwhelming power of his fast-forwarded Rasengan, managed to hold its ground, though its shield now bore a visible crack. Naruto's grin widened. So you can take a hit, huh? The Guardian construct recalibrated, its golden inlays glowing brighter. Its shield segments retracted, reforming into a single piece, but this time they began shifting and reshaping, turning into a massive warhammer. Before Naruto could react, the construct slammed the weapon into the ground, sending a shockwave of pure force rippling outward. The entire chamber trembled. Naruto instinctively phantom-stepped upward, phasing through the ceiling for just a moment before emerging above the battlefield. As he dropped back down, he used chrono grip to grab the shattered remains of the stone floor and reverse them, reconstructing a temporary platform mid-air. Landing lightly on his makeshift foothold, Naruto looked down at the Guardian, whose eye locked onto him. "Alright, let's see how you handle this." Naruto reached into his storage bag, pulling out a set of wooden kunai before hurling them at the construct in rapid succession. Mid-flight, he activated chrono grip, fast-forwarding their speed to near invisible blurs. The Guardian deflected most of them with precise, calculated movements, but two managed to pierce into its armor. Taking advantage of the opening, Naruto extended his hand, activating chrono grip again, not on the kunai, but on the construct itself. He focused, attempting to reverse its time, even if only for a moment. The Guardian shuddered, its body glitching as portions of its armor flickered between its current state and a previous, undamaged one. It resisted, but Naruto saw an opportunity. Gotcha. He leaped forward, summoning another Rasengan, but this time, he used chrono grip mid-spin, rapidly accelerating and compressing the chakra within the sphere. The normally swirling mass became denser, vibrating with unstable energy. He slammed it into the construct's core. For a split second, time seemed to pause. Then, boom! A deafening explosion rocked the shrine, sending shockwaves in all directions. The Guardian staggered, its golden inlays flickering erratically. Then, with one final flicker, its energy faded, and it collapsed onto one knee. Naruto landed, breathing slightly heavier but still grinning. Well, that was fun, way better than that blocky construct. The shrine's chamber rumbled once more. The engravings on the walls flared to life, and the construct, now motionless, began to disintegrate into glowing particles. At the center of the room, where the Guardian once stood, a pedestal rose from the floor. Upon it lay a shimmering orb of Zonai energy. Naruto reached out, his hand making contact with the glowing symbol. A surge of energy pulsed through his arm before dispersing into the air. A deep, ancient voice echoed through the chamber, "You have proven your mastery. The path forward is open." His arm resonated once more, glowing faintly as if guiding him toward the massive doors ahead. Looking over the downed construct, Naruto smirked. He was finally free to leave and begin his real journey. But before stepping forward, he turned, sensing a familiar presence. "Hey Roru," I opened the door. "We can finally get out of here and find Zelda." Roru gave a small smile but shook his head, confusing the blonde, who stared at him with furrowed brows. "I cannot leave Naruto," Roru said, closing his eyes for a moment before gazing at the young shinobi once more. Naruto raised an eyebrow, curiosity filling him. "What do you mean you can't come?" he asked, crossing his arms. "You said you'd guide me." Roru nodded, but his smile faded. He glanced past Naruto, his ethereal gaze fixated on something far beyond the chamber. Unbeknownst to the blonde, he was looking at a dragon soaring past the opening Naruto had just created. "I know what I said," Roru admitted, his voice calm yet heavy with meaning. "But it seems impossible for me to leave this place. I don't have enough energy left to maintain my presence. If I push myself any further, I may disappear entirely." Naruto looked down, a strange weight settling in his chest. From the moment he first heard Roru's voice, he had wanted to know more about the mysterious being who had put him here. And now, after spending time together, however brief, Naruto had begun to see him as something more than just a spectral creature. He had hoped Roru could become like Kurama, an enemy turned friend, a presence that remained with him through thick and thin. But it seemed that, once again, he would have to walk this path alone. Naruto let out a sigh before crossing his arms and smirking. "Fine, I'll go on my own," he said, a familiar confidence in his voice. "Not like this is my first time on a crazy journey." He turned toward the open doorway, but before stepping through, he glanced back one last time. "I'll see you later, Roru. When I beat Genin, maybe I'll figure out a way to get you a physical form." Roru let out a small chuckle, his ghostly presence flickering slightly in the dim light. Naruto took a deep breath, stepping through the new massive doorway and out into the open world beyond. The bright sunlight momentarily blinded him as he adjusted to the vast landscape stretching before him. The blonde then turned back toward the shrine's entrance one last time, sensing Roru's presence still lingering. The ghostly figure of the unknown guide stood just beyond the threshold, his expression calm yet unreadable. Naruto crossed his arms. "So, I guess this is goodbye." Roru nodded, "For now, but I have faith you will find your way, Naruto. You have already proven your adaptability. The challenges ahead will test you further, but I believe you will overcome them." Naruto huffed, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "Yeah, I've been through plenty of crazy stuff before. This is just a new kind of weird." Roru chuckled softly before his expression turned more serious. "Remember, you are not alone. There are those who will aid you, just as you will aid them. Seek out Zelda, and you will find the answers you need." Naruto smirked but gave a small nod. "Fine, I'll figure this out. And when I do, I'll make sure you get to see it too, old man." Roru smiled at that, his form beginning to fade into golden light. "Then go, Naruto, your journey truly begins now." With that, the spirit disappeared, leaving Naruto standing alone before the shrine. Letting out a breath, he turned toward the small stone pathway leading away from the Shrine of Time. A faint glow caught his eye, a smaller shrine nearby, pulsing with the same gold energy as the larger one. "Guess that's my next stop," he muttered, stretching his arms before making his way toward it. Naruto took a few slow steps forward, almost as if the smaller shrine was calling out to him. Faint whispers echoed in his mind, their voices rising and fading in waves as he drew closer. The pattern repeated, soft murmur swelling, then falling into silence, until he finally reached the glowing shrine. At its center, resting atop the stone, was a small golden sphere of energy. It pulsed gently, radiating warmth, and the whispers emanated from within. For a moment, Naruto simply stared, unsure of what it wanted from him. The voices were familiar, reminiscent of how Roru had first spoken to him. Then, amidst the indistinct whispers, one word came through clearly. Sword. Naruto's eyes narrowed. He didn't need to be told twice. Reaching into his storage bag, he pulled out the corroded Master Sword, its once proud blade now reduced to a fractured remnant. Holding it forward, he watched as the golden energy extended toward it, wrapping around the broken weapon. The glow intensified, then, in an instant, both the energy and the Master Sword vanished. The clouds near the bottom of the island parted, almost like the barrier that had been stopping Naruto from before was gone. And if that wasn't enough, the kind voice, the first voice he heard when waking up, called to him once more. "I'm out there, Naruto, find me." Naruto raised an eyebrow, staring at the empty space where the sword had just been. He didn't dwell on it. Instead, he turned toward the edge of the shrine, taking in the open sky below. With a smirk, he bent his knees and leapt off, diving into the unknown just as he had countless times before.